This is the Fujifilm X100VI. If you clicked on this video, it's probably because you're interested in buying this camera, upgrading to this camera, or you were like me, binging on all the YouTube videos before your pre-order arrives. In this video, we're going to talk about all things X100VI and whether or not I really think it was worth the upgrade or the price tag this year, especially coming from an already great camera, the X100V. Now disclaimer, I am a fan of Fuji, but they didn't pay me to say any of this stuff. This is a camera that I pre-ordered with my own money and waited for months on end to actually get my own unit. Coming from the Fujifilm X100V or the X100V, which is the 6's predecessor, you honestly probably couldn't tell from afar the differences between the two. Aside from literally a very subtle badge change and a few cosmetic details, the two cameras look pretty much identical. And that isn't because the designers over at Fuji were lazy, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth later in the video, but this form factor has already been loved by already so many people in its current state. If you look back at their very first release in the X100 series, it hasn't changed much. The overall form factor has made subtle changes within each iteration, and that is by design. Now, coming from the X100V or the X100V, which is the predecessor of the X100VI, to be honest, they look almost identical. You probably couldn't even tell which one is which from afar. But the changes really happen inside of the camera itself and the intentionality behind what Fuji was trying to do. So let's talk a little bit about why I decided to make the switch to the X100VI. Now this video isn't going to be a deep dive on comparing these two cameras side by side, but I will talk about why I decided to make the switch from the X100V to the 6, even though I seriously love this camera already, and why I forked up the money to buy the new version. Now, if you're looking for a spec sheet breakdown on how these two cameras stack up next to each other, this video probably isn't for you. But from a bird's eye perspective, Fuji decided to include their new processor in here along with an improved sensor and a higher megapixel count. So this new X100VI has 40 megapixels versus the 26 megapixel sensor that was in the previous 5. The X100VI also has a ton more features internally and also improved autofocus tracking. But ergonomically, design, and overall use cases are pretty much identical. So in that case, why then did I still fork up the money, pre-order this camera, and get the X100VI? Let's talk about why I made the switch. For a little context, I'm a content creator that loves shooting photo and video. Now, when I had the X100V, I loved it for its photo capabilities, but to be honest, it lacked heavily in the video department. When I made my X100V review video a while back, there were so many comments saying that, well, it's okay if it doesn't have video features, it's not a video camera, which I agree with, but to be honest, when you're spending almost $2,000 on a camera, that just didn't sit well with me. And I always thought that the X100V could be better if Fuji decided to take its video market a little bit more seriously in something as small in this form factor. And to be honest, that's exactly what they did with the X100VI. I think from a practical standpoint at who this camera is marketed towards and the current competition in the market, if you're going to spend almost $2,000 on a camera and you're excited to shoot content, you're likely going to want to shoot photo and video now. And so coming out with a camera that is primarily just a photo camera for that price tag is kind of a hard sell now. So I actually went on a few trips and I've used the X100VI for video, and as you can see, the footage looks really good. I mean, we're talking about a 6K resolution and a sensor that has a very sharp image. Now, sharpness could be not something you're really looking for, but when you're dealing with this much resolution in a camera this small, you can pretty much use it for anything. You can use it for YouTube videos, you can use it for Instagram Reels, you can use it for stories, you can use it just for documenting everyday life in very, very high quality. Now zooming in just even a little bit closer into the specific video features of the X100VI, we're talking about getting IBIS, in-body image stabilization, in a form factor this tiny. Now the X100V or the 5 also shot video, but it didn't have IBIS. which kind of just made the video useless. For a camera this small, trying to shoot handheld on your travels, you're gonna have a ton of shaky footage. And I just never used the 5 for video, specifically for the fact that it didn't have in-body stabilization. But Fuji somehow magically decided to put in IBIS without changing the form factor, which is a huge accomplishment in and of itself. Now, having 6 stops of in-body image stabilization in a camera that's this small is seriously amazing, and I don't know if it's talked about enough in these X100VI videos. For me, when I was on the hunt for the ultimate compact, portable photo and video, basically travel camera, this really checked all the boxes once they started taking video a little bit more seriously, because now when I'm on my trips, I can actually use this camera handheld for video. When you're on your trips, you don't necessarily want to lug around a gimbal or even a tripod at times. Sometimes it's just a hassle. So being able to just use this camera handheld for some solid video work is kind of a game changer for me and my workflow. Let's talk about the processor that Fuji decided to put into this camera. They use the X Processor 5, which is actually the same processor that they put in their X-T5 camera, which is a very capable video camera. So when it comes to actually the autofocus, the speed, all those things, the new processor can keep up. Because of the new processor, the new X100VI can actually shoot at a 6K resolution, 422 10-bit at 200 megabytes per second. Now that might not mean anything for those of you who don't shoot video, but as a practical reference, my $3,000 Sony FX3 can only shoot at a 4K 422 10-bit at 100 megabytes per second. So the fact that this small little guy can keep up with a camera of that size in just a codec side-by-side comparison, it's pretty impressive. Another notable feature that carried over from the 5 into the 6 is the built-in ND filter. I've set this front toggle to have the ND come on and off. It's 4 stops of ND, which can come in handy for both photo and video, but mainly for video. Again, being able to fit 4 stops of ND into a camera of this size is no easy task. And last but not least, due to the new processor, the autofocus has been extremely improved from the last version. Especially when it comes to video, the tracking is amazing now. One of my favorite features in the new X100VI is its subject tracking ability, and now with one tap of a button, you can track your subject almost perfectly for video. And lastly, the processor allows for an improved autofocus experience. It's night and day from the 5 into the 6. With this new processor and the new autofocus capabilities, the subject tracking went to a whole new level. Now, one of my favorite features on this new camera is the ability just to tap one button and track a subject when shooting video. It makes this camera very seamless to use, especially on the go or run and gun situations. Now, aside from its video capabilities, this is still a photography first camera. Now, for you photographers out there that's your main focus, this camera also has a significant improvement on the photography side of things due to the fact that it also has improved resolution and megapixels. This can shoot at 40 megapixels now versus the 5's 26 megapixels. What does that mean for you in like an everyday practical situation? Well, that means now when you're using the digital crop feature, you actually can get way higher quality images. In the 5, you're able to do the digital crop at the 26 megapixels. Now with the 5, because of its limited megapixel count, when you cropped in all the way to 70 millimeters and it was punching in digitally, you definitely can notice the loss in quality. But now with the X100VI, because it has that improved resolution and the 40 megapixels, even at 70 millimeters cropped all the way in digitally, you get a very usable image. So now with that extra resolution, you're able to crop in a bit more and also have a lot more playroom in your edit in terms of composition. Now with the improved autofocus and increased resolution, it makes the X100VI an even more capable photo camera than the 5 was, and the 5 was already great. For me personally, from a photo standpoint, this camera is starting to get into the territory of some of my more professional cameras that I use for client work. I could totally see myself using this camera now on set or for some sort of content when I'm in a pinch, even if it's a paid job. Now, as you know, Fujifilm was known for their film stock, for their old film cameras back in the day, and they still are. But what they've done is they've actually brought some of those film looks that they were able to create in their film stock into their actual digital cameras. which is really amazing because now you can get a very stylized look. They're essentially built-in presets when it comes to color within the camera itself. Now, these aren't just your basic presets that you see for color profiles on like your Sony, Canon, or Nikon. These are truly like practical lifestyle filters that you can use straight out of camera and post it or share with people and never have to touch and edit. You can actually change all the small details to your image like grain, highlights, the blacks, the curve, all those things actually within the camera so that you can tweak your image to your liking without having to actually move it into any kind of editing software. And everyone knows when it comes to shooting video, the color grade is very important. And with these Fujifilm cameras, you can actually use their film simulations over your video footage as well, which means for that same cinematic look for your photos, you can have that for your videos, which I don't know any other camera company that's doing that. For photographers, another game-changing feature in the X100VI is its hybrid viewfinder. Now with this hybrid viewfinder, you're able to go from electronical and optical viewfinder very quickly. So for those photographers that kind of want to have the best of both worlds in terms of the viewfinder or the EVF, you now have that in the X100VI. So in my opinion, when it comes to shooting content with this camera, both photo and video, it truly is a straight out of the box experience. You literally can get it, take it out of the box, start shooting content, and it's already going to look great, and it's very easy to use. Now, when the 6 was initially rumored to get launched, I seriously wasn't going to buy it because I didn't really think that it was going to make that much of a difference, and I already loved my X100V or 5 so much. But I had the privilege and opportunity to travel to Japan for the launch of this camera with my friend Justin. I was helping him shoot some footage for his X100 video, which allowed me to test the camera within Tokyo and actually be there for the launch event. We even had the opportunity to visit the Fuji HQ and also talk to the designers that actually went into making of this X100VI. The X100 series is a camera that has been loved by many around the world. And one thing that I appreciated about my visit to Tokyo and seeing what the designers were doing and Fujifilm is that they were asking a ton of questions to their audience and to their customer base on how they can improve the camera. And they took all those things into consideration when making this new version. They actually listened and delivered on a lot of the things that people were looking for. Aside from its features though, I've always said that the camera for you is the one that just makes you feel like you want to pick it up and go shoot. If you don't actually want to use the camera and you feel some friction with using it when you're on your trip or when you're doing a job, it's probably not the camera for you. It doesn't really matter what the specs are. But everyone knows there's that tool or there's that camera that for some reason, even though it's slightly dated, you just like that experience. You like how it feels. You want to pick it up all the time, and that's what I think this camera is for me, and I think it should be for anyone who buys this camera. So, is this camera worth it? That's honestly a question that I hope you can answer after watching this video, but for me personally, I think the X100VI is going to be sticking around for a while.